السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين فرجنا مسلمين. Beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, thank you very much for joining us on this evening in the Islamic month of Rabiul Thani, and also on this day in which we are having a reminder about the 15th year anniversary of the homicide by the FBI of our brother Imam Luqman Abdullah Hafidhullah Ta'ala. And we have with us two people who've been on this platform before. One attorney who I'm going to bring on, who actually helped with this case. He was not the lead counsel on this case, but he assisted and knows a lot of the background in regards to this case. And then also another attorney that we will bring on who has background of the case as well, but also will make a connection between his case and the ongoing issue of Imam Jamil Al-Amin Hafidhullah Ta'ala Al-Mazloom. So with that, I'm going to bring on Attorney Sharif, Akeel, Assalamu alaikum, and Sister Maha, Attorney Maha, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
So I'm going to keep all of us on at the same time, and I'll mute my microphone. Sharif, of course, you will go first, and then Brother Sharif will go first, and Sister Maha. But just having a conversation with you two, and we have people who are watching right now live on the platforms. But I can tell you all that out of my advocacy work in the Muslim community, almost 2 decades, this particular case right here affected me the most out of all of the cases that I've dealt with prior to working with CAIR Michigan and working with CAIR Michigan, as far as dealing with cases in the community of injustice and advocacy. By far, this one impacted me the most, and not simply because I knew Imam Luqman and traveled with Imam Luqman. As a matter of fact, we shared hotel room at the North American Imam Federation conference that year when there was the so-called flying imam debacle. I don't know if you all remember that, but there was an imam that was flying back from to Arizona from Minnesota, and there was an issue in the airport where he was pulled off of the airline. That was a long time ago, but not just because I knew him personally, but also because all the different factors of the case in terms of the anti-blackness, the usage of confidential informants that hails back to the time of the counterintelligence program, some of the national security issues that Muslims were facing in general during the Obama administration, because this happened during the Obama administration. And it really also showed me a lot about our community, right? And some of our strengths as well as some of our weaknesses. So before I pass it over to Brother Sharif, just for the audience as well, that Imam Luqman, he's not a statistic only, right? He was a father. He was a husband. His wife got unjustly deported back to East Africa during this whole ordeal. Grandfather. He was a man who helped many people who were returning citizens. He was well beloved in his community for feeding the poor, running a soup kitchen every Sunday, and he drove a cab. It wasn't like he was living a life of luxury. He was a real zahid, a real ascetic in that sense. So he was a man of the people. He was very respected, and he had a very close relationship with Imam Jamil Al-Amin. May Allah free him from his unjust incarceration. And he was, part of the original founding members of Maha, the Muslim American Alliance of North America. So with that, I think I will stop. I need to add on after you speak, Brother Sharif and Sister Maha. You speak, then I will maybe add in anything if need be. And also those of you who are watching, if you have any questions for Brother Sharif or for Sister Maha afterwards, you can put those in the chat. And I know that some of you who are watching, maybe you were too young to remember this event. I think about my son's 23 years old, and he barely can remember this happening. I have 3 children in university. They don't even remember this. We have young staffers at CAIR, Michigan, who are too young to even remember this, recent college graduates. So for some people who are watching this, this may be even brand new information. For some of you, it may be a refresher. So with that, I'm going to put myself on mic and on mute, and you take it away, Brother Sharif.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Brother Dawud, for inviting me, and thank you for making this a special event and recognizing Imam Luqman, the man who is, and the tragedy that unfolded back on October 28, 2009. There are still many questions that have not been answered, and I hope that through this dialogue and discussion today, that some of those answers will be provided. There are still some unanswered questions, and I'll explain that. But I think it is important to highlight the significance of today and Brother Dawud's holding this event, because if tragedy occurs that could have been prevented and we don't learn from it, shame on us, because it's going to happen again. And if we don't know what happened in the past, so we can be vigilant when an incident occurs in the future, it's going to be really a black eye on the community, because a tragedy like this could have been preventable. Like Brother Dawud also said, this has also really changed the trajectory of my career. Also, I represent many exonerees, many people that are involved with excessive force cases, and also I knew Brother Luqman, Imam Luqman. I knew him personally. In fact, I saw him earlier that year. He was at the Unity banquet, and he was wearing and sporting that blue garb and blue African attire. And I remember him just spreading the love everywhere. So I had a personal intake in this. And then so on that event, and I know many of you have not heard, or maybe some of you remember some of it, but it's important to kind of summarize some things that unfolded back then. On October 25, 2009, according to the FBI at that time, Imam Luqman was shot and killed by FBI agents in a sting operation. And according to the FBI, I'm again stating this, there was a gun battle. There was Imam Luqman with other co-conspirators. They were resisting arrest. Imam Luqman had a gun. Gunfight ensued. He was shooting at the FBI. He shot an FBI dog, and they shot him. And that's the story that the media was told. And it really, when that came out, it really shocked the community, especially the Muslim community, relatives and friends and family, because they knew the nature of Imam Luqman and they knew what he's all about. And it just did not make sense. It did not make sense. But you have to follow what, at least you can only act upon the information. So CAIR, in conjunction with CAIR, I was assisting CAIR. We wanted more information. We filed lawsuits under the Freedom of Information in state court, trying to get information. It was to no avail. There was resistance, stonewalling. We were not able to get any information. Finally, we secured a settlement. They've released some of the information, a video and some paperwork. And then a year later, and a demand was made from the city of Dearborn and the state of Michigan and the federal government for a full investigation, the DOJ. A year later, they come out with a press release, and they stated that the shooting was justified, and that report was issued by the United States Department of Justice and the Michigan Attorney General. So that was like really a blow to our efforts to try to really get to the truth. But one thing that was really just questionable is that to that day, we did not know the identity of the FBI agents who was involved in this shooting. One of the co-conspirators was finally released 2 years later, as Muhammad Salem. He came out and he wrote an affidavit, and it's 3 years after the shooting, and he said that Imam Luqman did not have a gun and he never fired at the agents. And in fact, ballistic analysis corroborated that an FBI bullet shot the dog. So this speaks outrage, because there was deceit. There was, unfortunately, we believe, fraudulent concealment in acting to the truth and getting to the truth. So that day when he signed the affidavit, the next day we filed suit in federal court. Unfortunately, the court said it's too late. 3 years are gone. And so we could not pursue further. So talk about justice delayed and justice denied. And this is really, if you peel the onion on this, there's so many outrageous things that we can learn from here. So it does not happen again. And that is really to, especially when we can testify to the man's character, to Imam Luqman Abdullah's character, and then it came out that in fact what was being fed in the media turned out not to be the truth. So you can't accept everything as gospel. So I think it was important. It's important to kind of to kind of provide some a picture here of what happened and why this is speaks such injustice. And it's important that we learn from this and we question this. It's been a healing moment between the community and FBI still, but there's still a long way. There's a lot of suspicion because of what happened, because a loved one was shot cold-blooded. It's unnecessary. But when Brother Dawud said that this is an event that he's going to hold today, I jumped at the occasion to be able to educate the public and inform them on what happened, so they understand the truth, exactly what transpired, what really happened, and so it's just part of the learning process for all of us.
Thank you, Brother Sharif. I think that before we go, Sister Maha, it may be a little important for me to give a little history in regards to what happened that actual day of the shooting. I think it's very important to show how law enforcement in America in general dehumanizes Black men, and also the issue of his being Muslim and being a leader, how there was so much excessive force used for the raid or excessive number of agents. So the day Imam Luqman was killed, there was a confidential agent of the FBI, and an agent provocateur going by the name of Jibril, was a white male, had tattoos, including on his neck. He told the Imam that he needed a ride. to the warehouse, and he was posing as an individual who was, in charge of or ran a commercial warehouse of some goods. So the imam was drawn that day to the warehouse in Dearborn, in which there was a raid. There were some other people who were there who were part of the community who were helping move, because this guy was claiming to be offering jobs to people in the community. The one eye and ear witness who signed the affidavit was also there. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, after the imam got in there and they all started doing work, close to 90 different law enforcement agents, Dearborn Police, Detroit Police, Michigan State Police, Immigration Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, even one Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, even from Canada, came. It had helicopters, and then a special technical unit by the FBI, basically a hit squad from Quantico. If anyone knows about Quantico base in Virginia is a training area for the FBI. It's also a Marine base, and people who are trained in sharpshooting, like Marine recon, trained there. They flew in this special technical squad. That's the squad that went into the warehouse that day, in which Brother Sharif talked about, in which they let out an attack dog. We had the pictures. Imam Luqman's body was mauled, and then they claim that the imam shot the dog. As Brother Sharif mentioned, the so-called gun that they claim he had, the ballistics didn't match. As a matter of fact, the imam's fingerprints were now on the gun when the gun was tested. There was no paraffin test that even proved he had a gunpowder on his fingers. And none of the imam's DNA was on this so-called gun, that they looked at. They shot the imam 20 times, including in the back, including in the groin. And then they used the police helicopter to fly the FBI dog that the FBI themselves shot, called Freddie. They used the helicopter to fly Freddie the dog to a veterinarian hospital in Macomb County, and they let Imam Luqman bleed out. Now, why was there so many people coming there when supposedly he was dealing in a conspiracy to sell stolen goods with those brothers, allegedly? It wasn't even terrorism related. Why? Because there was so much talk within the Bureau, and Sister Maha will get to this more, that he was so dangerous because he was a Muslim, and also his affiliation with the Imam Jamil, that most likely that technical team was brought in, like the same type of technical team that went and to that killed Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. Literally the same type of technical team, to show you, how in the perception of law enforcement, and again, this is during the era of Obama, because this was approved during the Obama administration. This took place during the Obama administration, and I have to say that because sometimes we look at all this excessive force and all these things are so bad under the party of the elephant, but the party of the donkey is so much better. That's not the case. That this was the attitude and mentality when they came and killed Imam Luqman. Then the agents went to his home. His wife was there. They go into the house. His wife was not properly dressed. They did not allow her to put on her hijab. They had contacted the media. They pulled his wife, Sister Amina, pulled her out of the home, right? Uncovered with the TV camera, put her in the house. Then they started deportation proceedings, claiming that she was not in the country illegally. And then shortly after her husband was murdered, then they deported her back to East Africa, back to Tanzania. So that's some of the background. We sued, as Brother Sharif mentioned. We sued the government for wrongful death and also fraud. And the case was thrown out on a technicality. They claimed we didn't have standing. Why? Because, as Brother Sharif alluded to, they would not release the name of the shooters that actually shot him. And by the way, the only people that claimed that Imam Luqman had a gun were the actual shooters, because the other agents were blocked from coming into the warehouse, and they were not allowed in until over an hour afterwards, after the special shooting team left, got back on a helicopter, and went back to DC with the so-called throw weapon. So the chief of police at the time, who was Ron Haddad, who came to the scene, the Dearborn police didn't even see a gun on the scene, because the FBI shooting team allegedly took the gun back with them to DC, supposedly, that he had, which of course the Imam really didn't have. It's called a throw weapon, right, that the FBI used. It was a totally fraudulent thing. So our case got thrown out at first, saying, oh, we didn't name the actual agents. So they claimed we didn't have standing. Then we went back and named the special agent in charge, Andy Arena, of the FBI, and the head of the technical shooting squad afterwards. Then they came back and say, oh, the statute of limitations is up. So we tried to appeal this matter to the appellate court, and went to Cincinnati, and then they declined it. Then we tried to petition for the Supreme Court to hear the case, and the Supreme Court only takes a limited amount of cases per year, and they declined to hear the case. And then that's where our legal options were exhausted in regards to the case of Imam Luqman. But I want you to know that Imam Luqman, how he was treated worse than a dog that day. You know, to the extent that they airlifted Freddie the dog without giving him any medical care. So that was a hit. That was a hit. So with that, I'm going to I just had to fill in some of those historical blanks. I'm going to turn over to Sister Maha now.
Okay, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. I seek refuge in Allah from misleading and being misled, from betraying and being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with the two of you. Yeah, these cases, and I would say, just like the two of you have said, Imam Jamil's case has changed my life. It's changed my view of the world. It's changed my view of the judicial system, and it changes us. And we see the world through a different lens after we've worked them. I definitely agree with that. Imam Luqman, I would say, was, if not the closest, one of the closest companions to Imam Jamil. It's interesting because I feel that they had like a brotherly love that we don't see anymore. It was a genuine love. It was a love where, I'll give you an example. I've heard this story from CAIR-MI multiple times, where Imam Luqman was injured one time, and Imam Jamil jumped in the car, drove all night to check on him.
CAIR-MI is in the audience. CAIR-MI is.
Is he in the audience? CAIR-MI is Imam Jamil's son. So, this is the kind of love that they had, where he would drive all night just to go check on him, get a visual, make sure he is okay, and drive back. They stood together. They had the same vision of community. They were, I believe that this was that Imam Luqman had such a genuine love for Imam Jamil. He would have done anything to facilitate his freedom. He knew that Imam Jamil was set up. He knew that Imam Jamil was not given a fair trial. And I think that he was committed to do whatever he can to bring justice and to bring awareness to the injustices against Imam Jamil. So Imam Jamil was taken from us in March of 2000, and Imam Luqman was assassinated in 2009. Imam Jamil's trial was in 2002. So that kind of gives you a time frame. And my understanding, and I would love to see the documents on Imam Luqman's case, is that the warrant for his arrest actually stated Imam Jamil's name on it multiple times. And that there was an affidavit that also had Imam Jamil's name listed multiple times. And it's really difficult for me not to believe that part of the reason that he was assassinated is because he was such a strong advocate for Imam Jamil. So just before getting into who Imam Jamil is and the status of his case, I just want to make it very clear that these cases, I believe, are very, very closely tied. And it's very eye-opening. It's eye-opening to see how men who are committed to justice and the empowerment of the people, how they can be taken down, and the plot could be so thick to do that, And I don't know if, Dawud, if you mentioned, but I know you mentioned that the dog, there was evidence that the dog was actually not shot by Imam Luqman, and that the FBI themselves shot their own dog. But the other part of this that really bothers me is that my understanding is that Imam Luqman was laying on the ground. Not that he was fleeing, not that he was standing up and fighting them, not that he was shooting a firearm, but he actually had surrendered and was laying on the ground unarmed, and they put 20 bullets in his body. It's shocking to the conscience, right, of anybody who cares about justice. But it's that. And then the other part of this is the extent that they went to. Like, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because the two of you knew Imam Luqman's case far more than I do. But just kind of like trying to tie how egregious it is, how egregious Imam Jamil's case is to how egregious Imam Luqman's case is. My understanding is that the warehouse that all of this happened in was owned by the FBI. The truck that they were allegedly packing, owned by the FBI. Every aspect, even the I believe it was TVs. I can't remember exactly what was going into the truck, but the alleged stolen goods, also all owned by the FBI. Like, fathom how many thousands of dollars were spent to intentionally assassinate this man, right? It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Over $1 million, not even tens of thousands.
Yeah, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. So just to give a little background, because like you said, I have children that are in college and graduated college, and they really didn't know about Imam Jamil before I started working this case. And I remember saying his name because we grew up with him, right? And I remember saying his name and my daughter looking at me saying, who is that? And it shocked me that they didn't know. And it also goes to the fact that, like, when you have a strong Black man who was a leader, who moved communities, who facilitated change, who understood the dynamics of systemic reform, the key is to erase him from history, right? It's to erase him. If they didn't assassinate him, which I believe they were intending to do the date that he was arrested, erase him from history. And that to me has just become more and more clear as the years go by on this case. But Imam Jamil was born in 1943. So he is 81 years old. He's an elderly man. He has a long list of medical ailments. He's still a very strong personality. He towers over everyone at 6'4", but he's this gentle being. And he always asks, what can I do for you? Is everything all right? No matter what his situation is. So just to kind of give you an idea of, like, there's something very gentle and caring about this human being. But he was born in October of 1943. In the early 1960s, he was known as H. Rep Brown. And he was involved in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is known as SNCC, SNCC, right, in the 60s. And then in 1968, SNCC was kind of transitioning, and he became the Minister of Justice between SNCC and the Black Panther Party. He was extremely involved in the civil rights movement. He met with former President Lyndon Johnson after the Selma crisis of 1965. He organized in 1966 the Black voter registration, wanted to enforce and was working hard to enforce, like, the Voting Rights Act in Alabama. So this is a man who fought heavily against Jim Crow laws. Like, he is essentially like a huge part of our American history, right? Aside from our Muslim history, but he's a huge part of African American history. And he arguably, I would say, laid the foundation for things like the Black Lives Matter movement, the current national Muslim organizations, all of these things. He became Muslim in the 70s when he was incarcerated. And upon his release, he went to Hajj. And he ended up in the 90s creating this community in the West End of Atlanta. And Imam Jamil's, his entire life was about empowering his people, about human rights. As he exited from like the civil rights movement, he came to realize like we have a duty as Muslims to focus on human rights. He advocated very heavily for the Bosnians during the genocide in the 90s. He advocated for the liberation of the Palestinian people. He became this human rights voice, this giant of a voice. And kind of like, let me rewind a little bit to give, I know I don't even know if the word COINTELPRO has come up yet, but it's essentially the underlying cause of all of this, right? And in the 1960s, there was a memo that J. Edgar Hoover had released that targeted Black nationalist hate groups, is what he called them. And in that 1967 memo, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, or at that time H. Rap Brown, was listed as one of the main targets, along with Stokely Carmichael, Elijah Muhammad, and Maxwell Stanford. So you're talking about like a historic figure. Everybody that's on the list of COINTELPRO has been assassinated or is long gone, right? Imam Jamil literally is quite literally the only one who has survived. And so the way COINTELPRO has been described is that it's a series of covert and illegal projects aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting domestic political organizations, including the Black Panther Party. If anyone saw the movie about Fred Hampton, the idea was anyone that was going to empower the Black community, they had to infiltrate and destroy, whether that's through reputation, disruption of the family, just causing mass havoc. And there was this encouragement of using, things, think outside the box. It didn't matter, like no rules apply to COINTELPRO. Just go in, divide, conquer, destroy, and don't allow them to gain any power, right? And it's interesting, you see how the Black Panther Party was demonized, when in reality, a lot of that movement revolved around food programs for the Black community, self-policing programs that involve, educating and empowering the communities from within. So there was this understanding of systemic reform, and that was a threat. So kind of moving on into the 90s, Imam Jamil establishes the West End community, and it's a community that it revolves around prayer. Like everything there, that there would be youth on the basketball court, the call for prayer would come, and everybody would go. And even till this day, when you discuss Quran with like Imam Jamil, may Allah give him, ease his hardship and free him. When you discuss Quran with him, he says, don't tell people to come read the Quran. He says, be the Quran and they will come. Like, this is the man that we're talking about. He says, feed the people, empower the people, allow people to help them recover from whatever their addictions are. Show them what their value is and what they're capable of doing, and just be a part of the community. And I think that Imam Luqman and Imam Jamil had that same vision. Like, you create a community, you create business opportunities within the community, and you empower your people. And that was their life focus, right? So essentially, he created the community, and in 2000, just before Eid al-Adha, there was, and I can go through like how it ended up, resulting in this, but throughout the years from the 90s into 2000, he was constantly targeted. And this continues, like he was there, the surveillance in the 60s, going into the 70s, going into the 80s, going into the 90s. COINTELPRO was very live and active. They monitor him constantly. There were informants in his masjid all the time. And, you know, we think of this as like, oh, that was a 60s thing, right? But the reality of it is, no. I mean, this case of Imam Luqman shows us that well into 2000, that was that strategy was very alive and well. They use people that they know that these leaders trust, that these leaders might love, that these leaders see the ability to change. You know, they feel like Imam Luqman and Imam Jamil, I think, were of the mindset that anybody can come to Islam and change and be amazing people for the community. And they always gave people the benefit of the doubt, right? And to Imam Luqman, that may have been one of the reasons it was to his detriment. There were people close to him that were planted there to monitor him, to know his every move, to set him up for this, what ultimately has happened to him, right? And I really believe that Imam Jamil's case, Imam Jamil is a state of Georgia prisoner, right? And the allegations against him on the night of the arrest, there was a warrant being issued for his arrest. It was the night before Eid al-Adha, and it was for a traffic violation, that he didn't show up to court on a traffic violation. That ended up being thrown out because it was a violation of his Fourth Amendment right, the whole search of the car and everything that went down with that initial case. But they were serving this warrant for his arrest for not showing up in court. And the reason he hadn't shown up is because there was a storm and the hearing got reset and he wasn't properly noticed. So that's kind of the background of how the warrant was being, how the warrant got issued. Very strange that a warrant for an arrest would be issued on a traffic violation, first of all. But nonetheless, two officers go out to serve the warrant, and they end up, one of the officers was shot and the other one was shot and killed. So it was a horrifying crime. No one says anything less than that. But nonetheless, on that day, Otis, we have somebody who has confessed to the crime and has consistently confessed for 24 years. And they continue to hold Imam Jamil. And as far as like on the trial level, there were so many injustices. So at the trial level of this case, there was no way that everybody felt like there was no way that this conviction would happen. You know, there was no evidence placing him at the scene. His, the ballistics, his fingerprints are nowhere on the ballistics. Now we know new evidence is showing, because we have the Innocence Project now on this case, that his DNA is nowhere on the firearms, right? And on the ballistics. There was DNA from two other men, but his DNA is not on any of the ballistics. And I mean, I can go on and on and on through the list of all the injustices on the trial level, right? But aside from this confession, there's new evidence coming up that there were other people on the scene, there were other witnesses on the scene. And just all in all, when you see these cases and how similar they are, when you have Imam Jamil, who's 81 years old, who's a state prisoner, who's being held in federal custody, right? And he's being held in Tucson, which is about 1,700 miles away, making it extremely difficult for him to have contact with his attorneys, with his family, where they ended up, the state of Georgia said that they couldn't have him, or they couldn't hold him for security reasons. So they pay monthly for the federal government to hold him. And he was transferred to the Supermax in Colorado until it was probably 7 years that he was at Supermax. And he was almost executed through medical neglect. And that's when he ended up being transferred out. So it's like injustice on top of injustice on top of injustice. And honestly, it's just an absolute miracle that on the day of the arrest, he wasn't killed. Because just like Imam Luqman's case, there was an FBI agent who suddenly appears, and this is a state investigation, a state warrant for his arrest, who appears on the crime scene, who then decides he's going to cross state lines into Alabama, where they find Imam Jamil. And this same FBI agent happens to be the only agent who found the weapons, who was the sole custodian of those weapons, who has a history of shooting a Black man in the back of the head and planting fingerprintless weapons prior to this incident. So, I mean, these are the things that are part of this case that are shocking to the conscience, that there's no way that Imam Jamil committed this crime. All of the evidence shows he didn't. You have somebody who's been confessing to the crime for 24 years, who's done it under oath in a trial for another case, and they still have not reopened. I mean, we're seeing some progress in this case. It is reopened through the Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit, and that continues to move slowly but surely. The Innocence Project is on the case also. And, you know, right now, what we're feeling like is we're working on his transfer to get him closer to family, to get him closer to his attorneys, to get him closer to the Conviction Integrity Unit that's reexamining his case. And we're also working on just, there needs to be a public outcry. This is not one of those cases that you just win on the, you know, it's already been won on the merits. It's already been proven. It's already, you have somebody confessing. You have so much evidence that shows that he's at the very least entitled to a retrial. I believe he's entitled to release. But we're working on this docuseries, and that's kind of the focus of what we're doing right now, to just bring awareness and to address the new information on potential new eyewitnesses, potential new suspects, to revisit the Otis confession, in a hope that, you know, this public outcry will result in somebody moving this case a bit more. There's so much to say, so I don't know if I was all over the place. Forgive me.
No
Dawud.
No problem. Thank you very much, Sister Maha. And people who are in the audience can ask questions to both of these honorable attorneys. I think I have to make a couple of comments before we take any questions, or then you two can maybe make some closing comments. I'm about to say closing statements, but we're not arguing anything here. But a couple of things, a few things to keep in mind. One thing what Sister Maha has said is, yes, in the criminal affidavit, Imam Jamil Al-Amin's name was mentioned more than once, and also was mentioned as H. Rap Brown, aka Imam Jamil Al-Amin, and they mentioned former radical member of the Black Panther Party, convicted cop killer, and it mentioned it more than one time. I believe it was like 4 times his name came up in the criminal affidavit, in which, if you look at the timeline, like the issue of the raid took place about 7 years after Imam Jamil had been convicted. So why in the world was Imam Jamil's name mentioned so much when he had nothing to do with anything that was alleged in the criminal affidavit? This was part of the smear campaign and the part of the targeting of the Federal Bureau of Investigations against Imam Luqman. So Imam Jamil was using that way. Another thing is that there were 3 confidential informants that were mentioned in the criminal affidavit, right? And that's just FBI. We don't know if there are any informants from any other agency, because you know, the Joint Terrorism Task Force was involved, right? But there were 3 over years who were part of Imam Jamil's, Imam Luqman's Jama'ah. They were going there. They were praying regularly. And I'm saying also to say that we only found out one of the people's names for sure, or one of the individuals for sure. And we have a strong hunch about another person, but we can't say it publicly because it's not 100% definitive, so we can't put it out. We did put out the picture of the one proven informant named Jabril, right? Which means that just minimum, there are 2 other informants that then were still part of the community or moving around the city to other Jama'at. And one of them is still involved in the Muslim community right now in Detroit, right? So when we talk about this issue of informants in the counterintelligence program that started in 1956 and in 1971, and then this other case, or even how Black Lives Matter was infiltrated by confidential informants working for the Department of Homeland Security during the Obama administration. This stuff is not ancient history, right? It's not to make you paranoid, but it's to say that just as there were hypocrites amongst the Sahaba or we can say spies, just as there was a spy amongst the Hawariyun, or the disciples of Jesus, of Isa alayhi salam. There were spies amongst the Beni Israel in the time of Musa alayhi salam. Anytime you have righteous people doing God's work, they're going to be spies. They're going to be informants, right? Now, there are two types of informants, and this is part of the education. Like, we need political education, right? There is the informant that just collects information. They look at people and they write reports, and or they have listening devices in which they record people. I busted someone, an Arab American sister, trying to secretly recording me one time. I think she's still in the community. They secretly record you. And then there's the confidential informant, right, who acts as an agent provocateur. So there's two types. The first type you can't do anything about, and I would say that, you know, I told the former head of the FBI, like, you don't need to send in spies coming through the front door. As a matter of fact, I told the former FBI director, my schedule is online for Salat al-Jumu'ah, Khutbah al-Jumu'ah. I said, come in the front door and listen to the khutbah. You might hear something you like, right? And Imam Luqman, when he was pulled coming back from West Africa, in the DHS, the Customs Border Protection agents started asking him questions. He explained to them the articles of faith and asked them to accept Islam. I remember when he came back and told me that. That was it. That was like I think within a year of him being killed. You know, he told me that he went to Senegal. He was in Gambia and Senegal. Coming through the front door. But the second type is more dangerous, and this is the type of person who will try to rile up people's emotions and try to instigate people and even come up with a plot that was not ongoing. This happened with a young man here, Khalil Abu Rayyan, happened to him, you know, from our community. You know, he worked in a pizza shop, and, you know, he fell into what's called a honeypot trap, where there was a sister chatting him up on Facebook, and he wants to get married, little cutie pie. Come to find out, she was working for the FBI, you know, and was talking to him, trying to get him to say things, you know, and he's one, but there's other cases that's happened here in Detroit, much less nationwide, right? Of literally, Craig Montel's one of the famous ones in Southern California, right? Who faked like being a convert and went to a community and was trying to encourage people to do attacks. And he outed himself because the FBI didn't pay him his snitch wages, right? I looked that case up, Craig Montel's his name. And actually, the FBI, you know, lets these informants do things that aren't legal for law enforcement agents to do, right? Because they can't do it. So they authorize this guy to do special pillow talk surveillance, and he slept with two sisters in the community to get information about what's going on in the masjid, right? I mean, this is public information, right? This came out. So that's the second type of person. So for those of you people who are online, or you see someone who's coming who always has the most radical thing to say, and we all feel emotional right now about what's going on in Gaza, right? Oh, you know, look at these people and look at the Zionists, and we have to do something. We need to go El Jihad fi Sabilillah, and then comes to you in the masjid and wants to pull out his phone and shows pictures of dead Palestinian babies, and it moves us all. And, oh yeah, I have a way you can fly into Egypt and cross over Rafah and go fight with the Mujahideen. 9 times out of 10, that's an FBI confidential informant trying to entrap you. And then they say, oh, they bust a terrorist sting. They have a terrorism sting. They busted a cell in Dearborn, Michigan, or something like that. And the whole thing is cooked up by the FBI, right? So this is what we need to be aware of, you know. And if you see someone like this who's talking reckless, you tell them, please stop, brother. If they keep doing it again, you go to the management of the masajid. Inshallah, the masajid will contact us and we will call law enforcement. And even if you have to take a picture of them, because I've had people send us pictures, you know, of people who are talking reckless, because we have to protect ourselves, because historically speaking, there aren't that many radicals amongst American Muslims. Like there's more in the Obama years in particular, they were producing more radicals than radicals themselves in the community, right? And this is a fact, right? So we have to be aware of the of this. So I have something right here, Brother Talib, alaikum salam. So we have a comment right here. I think you can take this one, Brother Sharif. Can the case of Imam Luqman be brought to court again, or as you mentioned, all options were exhausted, assuming no new details emerged since last case?
Oh, you cannot bring another court case under the doctrine of res judicata. It's the case has already been ruled upon, and we're 15 years removed, and it's just it's not something that we can do. But we have learned a lot from it. So moving forward, and one of the cases we have right now, it's a civil rights case involving an exoneree, where the FBI set him up in a task force. And I learned from Luqman's case, and we knew what to do. And we just got a recent ruling to keep the FBI in the case. So my point is, we've learned this is Imam Luqman's legacy will continue, not just in the social arena, but also in the legal arena in different forms.
Thank you, Brother Sharif. And let me mention this point too to people here. So like, yes, we want to have a good relationship with people in the government, but if there's a threat against our community, we don't need a special relationship with the FBI. They're supposed to do our job, meaning if the FBI comes to your home to ask you questions, you don't have to say ahlan wa sahlan, qahwa am shay. You know, you want to show them some Muslim hospitality, some Arab hospitality. You don't have to invite them in the house without a warrant signed by a judge with your actual address, right? You don't have to invite them in for baklawa and tea and some strong Egyptian tea, right? Egyptian tea is strong. There are two Egyptians on here. They know what I'm talking about, right? You don't invite them in for that. And there's no need for our community leaders to meet with them just because for good public relations. I mean, case in point, the FBI, the I is in there for a reason. It's investigations, and the FBI doesn't go and have special meetings for community relations with white Catholic congregations, with white Mormon congregations. And these other congregations, they don't have special meetings. They only want to have special meetings with Muslims because they view us as a suspect community. You don't hear about a whole bunch of informants lurking around looking for pedophile priests in Catholic churches by the FBI. You know, we're the ones who get targeted. So I just had to say that because there's a level of naivety, and it doesn't mean we're anti-law enforcement. As the late Ron Scott, who worked with the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality. He was a mentor for me in this work, and he worked extensively in advocating on the Imam Luqman case. And we had a lot of non-Muslim allies in ACLU Michigan, NAACP, SCLC, National Lawyers Guild. Julie Horowitz and was one of those people. David Goodman too, like Jewish attorneys that go back to the civil rights movement. David was a freedom writer, right? Who helped us in this case, right? In regards to the situation of Imam Luqman. But my point of it is that there's no. I lost my train of thought a bit, but what I was saying is there's no need for us in having any special meetings just to ingratiate ourselves as imams or community leaders to make ourselves look safe according to for the FBI, according to community relations. And that stuff doesn't work anyway. It really doesn't work anyway. And if you want to see why it doesn't work, A good case study of this you could look up for those of you young people is look up the case of Dr. Sami Al-Arian. He literally was a Muslim who was active. He used to fundraise for the Bush campaign, right? Met him at the tarmac, had direct numbers of people in the White House. And after 9/11, and they started to close down Muslim charities and raid people, he had direct contact to Bush. He got raided, got thrown in jail unjustly, and got deported. He's in Turkey right now, right? He got deported away from his family, right? And he had all these, and he used to do all these nice bridge building meetings. It didn't stop him from getting unjustly thrown in prison and got deported away from his loved ones. So I just had to say that. Hold on, we have another question here for one of you all. I don't understand. There are many cases that are being reevaluated for corruption. Why not this one? And for clarification, are you saying Imam Luqman's case cannot be reevaluated?
I can just, sister, you want to go?
Yeah, you want to go, Brother Sharif or Sister Maha?
Sure. There's been a, I believe, a change in the tide. Reports have been coming out lately demonstrating that especially that the vulnerable communities, especially the African American community, young males have been the target of police corruption, and it was widespread in the 80s and the 90s. And from that, there has been innocent clinic projects that are starting to come now. There's one in Michigan, one in Washington, one in Wayne County. Sister Maha, I'm glad you have one there. And I think so there are cases being reevaluated right now for, unfortunately, the sins of the past. That does not mean there's sins today also being occurring, but it was widespread. There's a point in the Detroit area, the federal government almost took over the city of Detroit because of the massive fraud that was taking place in the 80s and the 90s. Evidence was being destroyed. So another vulnerable community, obviously, is the Muslim and Arab community, especially after September 11. Easy prey, easy target, the media. So you have two vulnerable groups of people. And imagine if you're African American and you're a Muslim. Boy, that's a double whammy. So it's good to have this discussion so we increase awareness of this. We can't evaluate Brother Luqman's case because that's not an exoneree case. It's a wrongful death case. We cannot look into the evidence to to be able to free him. Obviously, Allah yarhamu. But there are many. Unfortunately, there's another tragedy. Marcellus Johnson in Missouri. This imam was recently executed by the prosecutor. It was against the prosecutor's opinion. The family wanted him out. The prosecutor questioned the evidence. The governor overwrote that, and so we got a lot of work to do. But I believe that there's the awareness is increasing in this area to reevaluate. So, I think this is at least a positive sign.
Yeah, and you also jogged my memory about something else, which is also tragic about this case with Imam Luqman. So, as was mentioned, there were two people in the warehouse when Imam Luqman was killed, two other Muslims. One, Brother Abdul Salam, who signed the affidavit, which then was not allowed to be put into the record because we could not go in front of the judge, who testified that Imam Luqman didn't have a gun. And the reason, by the way, he didn't say anything before is because directly afterwards, because he was put in jail. And his defense attorney told him not to talk or say anything until he was able to get out of the criminal cases that he was facing, which is common. So once he cleared himself of that and did what he had to do, by the time he was able to speak and sign, I remember the day he walked into the office. The other brother was named Abdul Muhammad. Now, in October, 6 years ago, he was killed by strange circumstances by the Detroit Police Department that claimed they were serving a warrant, and they came to his house like 4 o'clock in the morning, and they shot him 20 times. while he was sleeping on the couch. So that was the other person. He was part of Mashal Haq, and he was a student, a follower of Imam Luqman. So the other person who was there at the time where Imam Luqman was shot 20 times, he was shot 20 times. And subhanAllah, it was surreal because I went to the wash house for the Ghusl Mayyit when Imam Luqman was washed and shrouded. And then I went to the bathhouse when Abdul Muhammad was washed. I knew both of them. I prayed with both of those brothers. So that's the I can't say anything else right now. You all have any closing comments?
Sister?
Oh, go ahead. I
think this was a very constructive and a positive dialogue. Thank you, Brother Dawud, for bringing awareness and bringing this event today. We get to share notes. I get to learn a lot more about things that I didn't know, and I'm be able to share and exchange information. I think increasing community awareness of this will help us move forward. To be vigilant, to guard each other's rights, and to really understand that, and to not just take things at face value, but do a take and a double take and a triple take to do what we can to ensure that justice. And if one innocent person is jailed, work is not done. I mean, Brother Al-Amin, he's got to come out. We're all in prison. When one brother is innocent and he's in jail, we're all in jail right now. The work is not done, and it's all on us to do what we can to try to free the Imam and free all other innocent people. So we all have to be mindful of this. We're free. We're enjoying. Founding Father Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." People are fighting for freedom every day around the world, and we just have to. We're taking this for granted, and we have innocent brothers in jail right now, and they're fighting every day. These exonerees that they go to library every day to try to fight, and they're filing motion after motion, and they're on their own, and they become lawyers actually inside. And they strengthen, and anything. The one thing that motivates them is their faith. They're so beholden, and their faith is so strong, mashallah. But we can't forget this, because we're not free until they're free.
Thank you, Brother Sharif. I think this is directly for you, Sister Maha, but how can one follow up specifically about the case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin?
Okay, Bismillah. So I encourage everybody to please go to freeimamjamil.com. Right now, we are trying to get the funds necessary to complete that docuseries. That's really where a lot of our focus is going on. So if you go there, you can support, but we update that website with action items all the time. If there's a letter campaign or a calling campaign, we put it on that website, freeimamjamil.com. I also encourage everybody to follow Students for Imam Jamil on Instagram and on Facebook. I believe they are at _freeimamjamil on Instagram. So, I mean, those are the ways that you can assist, but otherwise you can also just educate yourself, educate yourself. And Imam Jamil does have a book called Revolution by the Book. I encourage everybody to read it. There's a book that Maurice Salih-Khan had written called The Imprisonment. Actually, I have it right here. The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin. This kind of outlines the case, I think, through 2019. So there's been a lot of changes since then. But just remain active. You can write letters to Imam Jamil. He tends to answer them now that he got his vision back. So just stay informed. If we have action items, please jump on them. And again, like, Imam Jamil is alive, and this is our chance to actually get it right and to get him freedom, and just to allow him to enjoy the last years of his life out here with us. He's wrongfully incarcerated. And these are examples, we've learned from these two cases. And, Imam Dawud, when you were speaking, there was this mug that CAIR used to give out, said, no chai for the FBI. That's what it reminded me of. But it's real. Like a lot of people say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, and you know, that won't happen to me, and I don't have anything to hide. These men were advocating for, you know, humanity, and they were empowering their people and advocating for human rights. They weren't doing anything wrong. We have people confessing to the crime that Imam Jamil is incarcerated for. So don't think that you're above, you know, the entrapment. Just be aware. And it's unfortunate, but you know, when you learn who may be the informants, or when you learn who were the informants, oftentimes it's people that are very close. You know, it's people that are very loved, that are very trusted. Imam Jamil can talk about conversations he's had with Dr. Martin Luther King and the strategies that they used in the civil rights movement. This is a gem. And he's silenced, you know, even to get his interview for the docuseries. They've declined to allow the interview, the video interview, and that's an uphill battle all by itself that will require us to file pleadings. So, I mean, just stay on top of what's happening with the case. And I feel like we all have a duty to this elderly man that laid the foundation for all of us.
Thank you. We'll close out in one moment, but something Sister Maha said very casually that maybe some of you all didn't catch. She said that Imam Jamil can write you back because he can see now. And the reality was he was being denied medical treatment, and he had temporarily gone blind and lost his vision. And once people like Sister Maha, with the permission of Allah and the legal team, fought to be able that after he was being deprived of essential medical care, he was able to get the care that he got, so that through the bifadlillah, he was able to see again and get his vision back. But you know, when we're talking about oppression upon oppression upon oppression, like, it wasn't because he just lost his eyesight in, like, you know, by some sort of negligence on his behalf or something that he did that was wrong. It was very deliberate and systematic deprivation of medical care for this senior citizen, for this elderly imam that caused this situation. So we have to say this, and it's not something that is uncommon, that when it comes to people who are being targeted, that healthcare will be deprived for people so that they can lose faculties or die a slow death. Even of a situation I know of someone who was denied their medication because they suffered from severe high blood pressure, and they died a slow death from not being able to have their blood pressure medicine, right? So to that extent. So we ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help all of these brothers and sisters who are locked up in unjustly in prisons in America, or over sentenced in prisons in the United States of America. And like Marcellus Khalifa Williams was mentioned, he was the second brother wrongfully executed in the same Jama'ah in Minnesota in a year by the death penalty, right? The other brother's case just didn't make as much notoriety, but it was two people in the same masjid that had the janazah done by the same imam, who had DNA evidence that at least brought into question that they should be executed. That made it highly questionable, but like a lack of evidence, or evidence pointing towards someone else, right? And many of these people are not Muslims. They're unjustly incarcerated, and we should care about everyone. But there are many Muslims that are locked up in our country, and America is the leading incarcerator in the world, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We have more people in prisons than in Russia and China combined. Now think about that. Look how much, like those are supposedly dictatorships, right? Those are supposedly, ran by dictators and despots. But in this so-called democracy, we have more people in prison, including some political prisoners, right here in this country. We don't have to look to China or Russia. With that, my brothers and sisters in Islam, I thank Brother Sharif and Sister Maha. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala increase both of their spiritual stations, protect both of them from harm, grant them shifa from any maladies that they may have inwardly as well as outwardly. I ask Almighty Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant Imam Luqman Abdullah the status in the Akhirah similar to Hamza, and the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Sumayya, anha, the first unjustly killed Muslim amongst the companions. May Allah be pleased with the righteous, with the rightly guided, righteous companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to grant relief and freedom to Imam Jamil Al-Amin, just as Allah freed Yusuf alayhi salam from prison. We ask you, Ya Allah, to free Imam Jamil Al-Amin. We ask you, Ya Allah, to shower your patience upon the families of Imam Jamil Al-Amin and Imam Luqman Abdullah. Shower them with patience, Ya Allah. Shower them with patience, Ya Allah. Grant them comfort, Ya Allah. Increase their sustenance, Ya Allah. And we ask you, Ya Allah, to help the mazlumin wa mustad'afin, all of the oppressed and marginalized people all throughout the world, especially our brothers and sisters in the Congo, our brothers and sisters in Sudan, our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and all throughout Palestine and the greater Sham, which includes Lebanon and which includes Syria, our brothers and sisters who are in Yemen, our brothers and sisters who are in concentration camps, so-called re-education camps in China, to help the Rohingya, Ya Allah, in Myanmar, Ya Allah, to help our brothers and sisters under illegal occupation in occupied Kashmir, Ya Allah, and to help all of the brothers and sisters who are unjustly incarcerated from the believing men and the believing women right here in these United States of America. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.